Halloween
forever.
All right, Steve, got one for you. Ready? Think hard about this one.
Okay.
Because it's a real thinker. Why did the chicken go to the seance?
Why did the chicken go to the seance? Whoa. God. He just wanted to reach the other side. God damn it.
Bingo! I knew you had it in you, buddy. Welcome, boys and ghouls, to a motherfucking Minisode of Halloween is Forever. I'm Brian.
I'm still current champ, Steve. You're stuck with me.
Guys, it's becoming a problem. It's becoming a real problem in my life and the lives of many people out there, which we'll talk about here in a sec, how we're going to try to rectify that. I think we got a good plan. I think we got a good plan of attack. We really need to get out from under this just dark cloud that's hanging over us. That is Steve's three-peat. But we'll get into all that here in a damn old second, guys. Welcome to the show. We got a little minisode loaded up for you today. Going to be a real fun one. We're going to talk about a brand new Shudder original that released here just, I think in the last week or so, right? Maybe last 2 weeks, something like that. Brooklyn 45, which is a fun little flicky that Steve and I watched this week. We're going to talk about that. We also have some other things we got to talk about. For those of you who are new to the show, before we get into that, it's probably relevant for me to tell you how this son of a bitchin' thing works. We usually get some little influx of listeners here in the summertime leading into that dang old spooky season. People starting to think about spooky ooky stuff. Some of us are thinking about spooky ooky stuff all year round. Some people just start to indulge in the spooky ooky stuff during a certain time of year. I want to reiterate, fuck you. Fuck you, you bandwagon fans coming on here during the Halloween, during the spooky season. Kiss my ass. Also, welcome. Thank you for tuning in. Here's how this sumbitchin' thing goes. We pop some old content on the interwebs every Monday, but our showdown episode for each month is the first Monday of the month. We have a whole bunch of damn old topics. Some of them are subgenres. Some of them are other kind of weird shit, kind of like we have this month. We throw a bunch of them on this big old giant spinny wheel. We're always ready for suggestions. So moving into, I don't want to say season 3, but year 3 of the podcast, kicking off year number 3, we're looking for some new potential topics. So send them our way in the DMs. Got a couple of fun ones recently that we'll add to the list when we start spinning about our August showdown episode. But keep them coming. Send them to us in the old DMs at Halloween is Forever on Instagram, at Hallow Forever on Twitter, Halloween is Forever on Facebook, or if you want to send us one of them damn old-fashioned emails, I haven't mentioned that in a while, it's at Halloween is Forever pod at gmail.com. Still going to make that mistake every goddamn time. So then once we have those 3 topics, put them out on the social medias, and all of our social media friends and listeners vote on which topic they want us to talk about. Once we have a topic, we each pick a movie or a show or whatever pick that's associated with that topic. Then on our showdown episode, we argue about it, all that sort of thing. This coming showdown episode, which will be our July showdown episode, will be our first showdown. Not our first showdown overall, sans Meg, but our first showdown since Meg's
post-Meg era.
The post-Meg era. That's a good way of putting it. Yeah, let's think about it as eras, right? Meg was like, that was the Attitude era. Let's be honest with it. That was Bog Hag era. And listen, Meg's not dead. She's just dead to us. No, I'm just kidding. She's promised she's gonna come back, but she's got a bunch of stuff going on, so she doesn't have the old bandwidth necessary to record every week. So she's gonna come and go as she pleases. She's just gonna fucking roll in here, flip a table, piss on the rug, and then fuck off for a couple months. That's her style.
Just like a Brock Lesnar.
Just like a big old Brock Lesnar. Just like The Rock ultimately became a CM Punk, if you will, just floating around doing whatever the fuck they want. And, she'll be back periodically. However, in the interim, we're going to have some fun special guests for those showdown episodes. We've had in the past, our lovely friend Bigfoot Ben, which I'm sure will come back and be on another one in the future. I won't bury the lead here. We have our topic for the July Showdown, and we also have a guest, which I'm going to tease, but I'm not going to tell you until next week who our guest is going to be to discuss. But when we talk about the topic, you may be able to guess who the guest is. Maybe not. In any case, so here's what you had to choose from for the July Showdown episode that we just voted for here in June. We had found footage. We had, what was the other one I just forgot?
We
already?
had Nickelodeon Halloween specials.
I just asked Steve before we started recording, what are they again? And he reminded me, and then I immediately forgot because I have weed brains.
Hell yeah.
Nickelodeon Halloween, found footage, and Rage Virus. That was the one I was forgetting. So those were the three. The one that was selected received over 50% of the overall votes from our social media friends and listeners was Nickelodeon Halloween, you guys. So a little bit of a departure. Usually we're talking about flicks. We're talking about movies. Now, that's not to say we can't talk about movies, but this has opened up to a whole host of Halloween specials, Halloween episodes of Nickelodeon shows, things that have aired on Nickelodeon that have something to do with Halloween. That is that is being left, pretty wide open in that capacity. So that should be fun. Little change of pace. Like to hear that yins are getting psyched up for the spooky season, as I am as well. So knowing that, you may be able to guess, or you might be able to establish a reasonable estimate about who our guest is going to be for the July Showdown episode, but I'm not going to tell you that. I'm gonna tease it on until next week. So if you've got suggestions, however, for Nickelodeon Halloween related things, like I said, episodes, maybe it was a made for TV movie, maybe it was some sort of other weird special thing I don't even know nothing about, send them over to us, suggest them, pop them our way in the old DMs. We'll be happy to have some other options to choose from. So excited for that in July. All right. Now let's get into the business we got to talk about here on this whole episode. First of all, Steve, you got beers that you're enjoying? Is there some beers we should talk about?
I'm enjoying a beer.
What you got?
I picked up, I took a little trip over Creekside not too long ago.
Mm-hmm.
I picked up like 4 out of there.
Yeah.
But the one, you heard about the ones last week about those orange goofes that I was drinking. But this one is just something straight down the middle, nice and easy. Cellarworks Brewing, cocoa bean, sweet stout. All
right. You're off you're off the goof shit for a week.
No goof shit this week.
No goof shit this week. Yeah, I've been on a little bit of a goof. How is it, first of all?
I mean, it's nice. Yeah, it's just it's got like, it's not a coffee stout. It's just it's a nice sweet stout. Like there's no super bells and whistles with it, so it's hard to really say it does anything wrong. It doesn't do anything like blow your socks off either. It's just a nice sweet stout to sit down with.
Nice. All right. What's the ABV on that sumbitch? I'm always curious because
only 5.
Yeah, nice little moderate ABV milk stout situation. You always like to see it. I used to drink an absolute buckload of Mackeson's XXX stout back in the day. For all you old craft beer heads, all you import bastards out there, y'all old money tickers, you might know about Mackeson XXX stout. All y'all kids out there, you don't know nothing about Mackeson XXX stout, but that was like a really nice moderate ABV. I think it was right around 5% milk stout. I used to slurp that shit down back in the day.
I think I've only had one of those, and it didn't impress me when I had it.
Yeah, there's nothing. It's like there's no frills to it. It's just a nice, slightly roasty, sweet English, milk stout. Sweet stout, milk stout. Those terms are interchangeable. Basically, back in the day, guys, it was kind of a novelty to have lactose in your beer. You put a little lactose in there. People were like, what the fuck? Like, I remember going to the homebrew shop the first time I made a milk stout and asking for lactose. And they were like, "Oh, making a milk stout, huh?" Like, because that's the only style you would see it in. Now it's like
Right.
9 out of 10 beers on a given draft list sometimes have lactose in them.
Well, that's also because that draft list is 9 out of 10 IPAs.
IPAs and sweet and slushy sours and stuff like that. Which,
Right.
listen, guys, I like them a little bit. We're doing some weird stuff with some of those types of beers here. With the old Dead Arcade project Steve and I are working on. Shameless plug. If you don't know about Dead Arcade Beer, BIER, go follow us on the social medias. Little project your boys are working on. A little side
It's for
project for a company.
the audience.
Yeah, it is weird, fucking cryptic, cosmic horror, retro arcade themed brewing company. So it does feel like a good target audience. There's quite the Venn diagram of people who might like this podcast and people who might like Dead Arcade Beer is essentially a circle. We know our audience. We cater to a niche audience over here.
We don't do anything different outside of this. Like it's not like we're doing mid-modern century architecture on the outsides.
Yeah, we don't leave here and then just like really focus on like horticulture. Like it's spooky shit outside of here as well. But speaking of beersies, I got a little one here, and it's a dark boy, too. Look at this little handsome son of a bitch. Not a stout, but I am drinking. The name of the beer is Black Forest Hills. This is a Czech dark lager from our lovely friends over at Union Brothers Brewing in beautiful historical Harmony, Pennsylvania, which is right out my way. Yeah. Those guys are cool and their beer's good and the food's good. And I have not been to their new location, which I know they're just like, it's not up and running, but they're doing some pop-ups over there. And goddamn, their beers have been really impressive. I've always liked their beer. I probably didn't frequent them as much as I should. And recently I started going over and snatching up some beer from them and everything's fucking nice. Real nice.
Oh yeah.
So
now that's a brewery. I definitely got started on their Gloop Glop shit. Before I started having like their regular stuff, but like I like their Gloop Glop stuff. So
yeah, and actually I haven't had much of their Gloop Glop stuff. I just went in the other direction. I remember I was really on a kick there for a while. This might have been even during COVID. They had an ESB that was really nice that I was drinking the shit out of, and they do a nice mix. You go over there, get a good old West Coast IPA, you get a Czech dark lager, stuff like that. But then also, if you're in the mood for some goof shit. You can get goof shit too, and they do a really nice job with that. And I say goof shit, tongue in cheek, but literally that's the type of shit we're doing with Dead Arcade. So,
right,
like that's I enjoy that stuff as well. But you can go real classic style. You can do straight goof troop and anything in between. So yeah, check out your boys over there at Union Brothers. They do a real nice job. This Czech dark lager is fucking killer. I got a 6-pack of it, and I think this is my last one actually. So, okay. So we talked about the beers. We talked about the upcoming shows and all that sort of thing. Also, I will remind everyone once again, if you've got topics for minisodes, send them our way as well, because, we're kind of, we kind of, leave those up to our own discretion. Like, for example, yesterday, we're like, what are we going to record for our minisode this week? Didn't really have anything in the hopper. So you said, what do you want to record? I said, hey, didn't I see you watch that there Brooklyn 45? I watched it too. Let's talk about it. So it's as simple as that, guys. If you want to send some suggestions our way for minisodes, we quite often take those suggestions and do them on the dang spot. So, this movie, I did not realize, because I didn't know anything about it, besides it was just like being pretty prominently featured on Shudder, kind of a holiday type of film. Vaguely takes place during the holiday season.
This is less of a Christmas film than Die Hard is.
This is too. What other movie did we watch that long ago that we were like, wow, wasn't expecting a Christmas movie or Christmas horror? It was the freaking the one with the it was a full moon feature, right? What was the one with the cyborg bullshit?
Yeah, Murderbot.
Yes, Murderbot. Right. We were also surprised to learn that was a Christmas themed horror movie as well. This one is vaguely Christmas themed. There's definitely some Christmas season imagery here, but Before we get into the story, I guess a little bit, this just came out, released on, like I said, on Shudder as a Shudder original. I think it was at South by last year, but it definitely did like the festival circuit, from what I understand. It has a pretty good pedigree behind it. It's got a director that I've been really, has kind of like had some sporadic directing jobs, but what I've seen, I've liked a lot, which is Ted. How am I going to say his last name without fucking it up?
You won't, because I don't know how to say it either. So
Geoghegan? I think it's just Geoghegan.
Ted Geoghegan, maybe. I would say, if I took a stab at it, Ted Geoghegan.
Geoghegan.
That's how I would go for it, but I think we're both wrong. So
yeah, probably, but it's Geogheggan. Hell of a last name. But you'll recognize
by some hard consonants, Ted.
Come on, figure it out. Figure it out with the last name there. But not a ton of directing credits, just 4. I've seen. I have not seen Queer for Fear: The History of Queer Horror, although it's been on my watch list for a while, but haven't pulled the trigger on that. But I really liked We Are Still Here, and I think I've talked about that a couple of times. That was his, I think, his like kind of featured directorial debut, and was fucking great. Also featured Larry Fessenden, which was in this, and just really creepy, atmospheric, some great scares, great performances, and of course had the great Barbara Crampton in it, which I'm never going to not watch something with Barbara Crampton in it. Was really, really good. I think we talked about that before. You've seen that one, right?
We talked about it before, but I actually hadn't seen it all the way through until after watching Brooklyn 45. Because I watched it. Like, We Are Still Here has been on Amazon Prime forever.
Yeah, it's from 2015. It's been around for a minute. Yeah.
Yeah, so I definitely had popped it on and like have fallen asleep on it. And just because, I just fall asleep on movies because I'm old now. Yeah. I go to bed watching shit.
I do it all the time.
Yeah. So I hadn't revisited it yet, but after watching Brooklyn 45 all the way through and enjoying this movie, I was like, okay, I'm going to dedicate the time and like really dive into We Are Still Here as well. And like, I like it. Yeah, I like that film as well.
Yeah. I think I might have misspoke. He was a producer on the queer horror miniseries that's on Shudder. His other directorial, besides We're Still Here, he did Mohawk, which I did watch. I'll be honest, I have a good like inclination about. Like, I do recall enjoying the movie, but I don't remember a lot about it. It was from 2017. But I do remember watching that, I think, like in the pretty early days, because I think that was on Shudder as well. And then the other one, his other director credit besides Brooklyn 45, is something that I'm intrigued just because of the title, is International Playboy's first movie, Ghouls Gone Wild. And listen, if last week taught us anything, is if you put a ghoul/girls pun in there, we're in for a treat. So I would check that out, but it does look like a video or short film type of thing, something like that. But
yeah, it seems like he definitely, like, it may even be his student film.
Could be,
because it's from 2004, meaning it's before mine.
Oh yeah, so I didn't even recognize. I didn't even look at that. You're right. That's going back almost a couple decades at this point. So that might have been like you said, you might be right. There might be a student film. Definitely a lot more credits as a writer. Director is worth noting for all of his for his 3 feature-length director roles. He also wrote the story for Satanic Panic, which was just from a few years ago, which was a fun flick. Screenplay for a short called Night of the Pumpkin. Don't know anything about that. But there was a couple other things that I think I recognize. Maybe not. Maybe I'm thinking of one of the directors, but or one of the performers rather. But yeah, I mean, We're Still Here, and following up with Brooklyn 45, feeling pretty good about our old boy Teddy. Got some quality stuff here.
Yeah, it seems like he's ready to take off. Like he's, not that he's not done anything, but like he's, ramping up now.
It feels like
between
that, right?
Between this film and We Are Still Here. I haven't seen Mohawk, and I didn't hear a lot of buzz about it, so I can't comment one way or the other. But these two ghost films are definitely getting them a lot of buzz.
Yeah. I mean, I've seen We're Still Here as like one of the like sleeper picks of the teens kind of thing for horror. On some of those lists, that's like the best underrated horror films of the 2010s kind of lists. I've seen that pop up on there as well, which I would agree with. A little bit about the cast here. Definitely some recognizable folks. Not necessarily folks who have been in a ton of things, with the exception of Anne Ramsey, who you would recognize right off the bat. She plays Marla. She's been in a ton of things, a lot of TV, some genre stuff for sure. I think her biggest credit, if I'm not mistaken, was a sitcom. What was it? She was in A League of Their Own. She was in The Taking of Deborah Logan and Planet of the Apes for genre fans. Oh, Mad About You. She was on Mad About You, which was pretty big sitcom for a long time. But yeah, like she is a face you would definitely recognize, and she does, I think, a great job in this. You have we mentioned one Mr. Larry Fessenden, who is a genre darling director in his own right, as well as a prolific producer, performer. Just been around the genre for a long time, and like I'll watch pretty much anything with him in it. He plays Lieutenant Colonel Clive Statter.
Statter, you get it.
Statter. Good God, I got mush mouth, guys. They call him Hawk. Most of the time, they refer to him as Hawk in the movie, and he's kind of like the person that's really, he is almost the inciting incident in the movie in a lot of ways, which we'll talk about here in a sec. You have Major Paul DeFranco, played by Ezra Buzzington. Holy shit, what a name. Ezra Buzzington. Not familiar. Like, I recognize the guy's face. Didn't recognize the name. That's not a name you'd forget. But then I looked in there, and he has been in, quite a few genre films. Like, genre fans would probably recognize his face. And then,
do you think this name is like a chosen stage name? Because he just kind of knows that he has like an old school like flair and face about him.
Yeah.
So he's just like, hold on, I'm just going to typecast myself real quick by making it sound like I'm from 1933.
Yeah, he has that type of like, he has a very distinct look to him. Not to sound crass, but like he was in the remake of The Hills Have Eyes, and you kind of, not that he's even like, I'm not saying he's like a bad looking guy. He's just got like pretty exaggerated features. And he has done some like kind of like creature work type of thing. And with prosthetics and stuff. And like I said, in the remake of The Hills Have Eyes, if you look at the image from that, you'll recognize him in that. He's played some like minor roles in some really big movies though. Fight Club, minor role in Fight Club, minor role in The Artist, but over 100 acting credits, even directed a little bit. Like, again, it's a face you will definitely recognize. He was in Nightmare Cinema. I don't know if you remember that from a few years ago. We might have even talked about it, but that was kind of a fun little one. Didn't have like Mickey Rourke or something weird in it. If I'm remembering properly, but like, yeah, this guy just always plays like, like, I don't know what to say it, but just like kind of grimy, oftentimes either British or like kind of flat top, square headed, like uptight, military-ish types, not always military, but just like kind of establishment types, I will say. Yeah, he's actually,
he plays a bunch of squares.
he does. He oftentimes does. But boy, he's just, you're looking down through his IMDb, and this guy has been in so much stuff. It's wild. Anyway, yeah. So and then I guess the other person who two other people I guess we should probably mention, Jeremy Holm, or a few other people real quick. Jeremy Holm, who I thought I recognized him from more stuff. He plays Archie, Major Archibald Stanton. He has like, I don't really recognize him from a lot of stuff, but I definitely recognize his face. Seems like the kind of guy who would be in some Hallmark Christmas movies. Just like a big strapping, handsome, older, I would say older, but like middle-aged gentleman.
He has like kind of almost like a Chris Noth kind of thing going for him.
I could see that. Yeah.
Where he's just like tall and strapping and like almost similar to John Hamm as well.
Yeah, I could see that as well. He's just got that like classic. Apparently he was in House of Cards. Like that kind of makes sense. And even I'm looking through his photos in IMDb, and there's a couple instances where he was playing like kind of like looks like a rednecky type of character, and he almost looks out of place because he's just too like, he's just got that kind of 50s, 60s businessman, like classically handsome look to him. So he almost looks weird dressed up as like this redneck kind of thing.
He looks like if they needed to cast the guy who played Superman in the original Superman serials, George Reeve.
Yeah.
Like if they wanted to cast George Reeves, they would cast him instead of Ben Affleck.
Yeah, I could see that. Or Christopher Reeves.
No. George Reeves was the original serial actor. Christopher Reeve was the 70s.
Yeah, Christopher Reeve, is who I was thinking of. I don't know who George Reeve is. My history with Superman doesn't go back beyond Christopher Reeve. Yeah, and then you've got again, it's another very recognizable face in Christina. I think it's Klebe. Yeah, and she's been in a bunch of stuff. Rob Zombie's Halloween, probably most notably for genre fans, but yeah, she's been in a ton of things as well. So again, you'd probably recognize her. And then the only person that I did that wasn't like an immediately recognizable face for me was the guy who played Bob, which is Ron E. Raines. And I really get a kick out of when someone's middle initial kind of like sounds like it could be part of their first name, like Ron E. Raines. It's like Chuck E. Cheese. I swear that like he looks so familiar. He just looks like he plays a square again in like everything. But I look down through, I'm like, I don't really recognize him from much on here.
Yeah. I mean, his acting career only goes back to 2014, so it seems like he maybe got started later in life.
Yeah.
Yeah. Are you trying to say that Ron also picked his own stage name and that his middle name is Entertainment?
I would love to believe that. And I do. I choose to believe that. Yes. His name is Ron Entertainment Raines. I forgot that Chuck E. Cheese's middle name is Entertainment. That is really, I would say once every 5 years, I'm reminded of that, and it just tickles me just as much every time.
Charles Entertainment Cheese.
Charles Entertainment Cheese. Ronald Entertainment Raines. Yeah, so small cast on this, but a lot of recognizable faces. This is a not to sound too I don't know, snobbish about it, but I would go as far as to call this a chamber drama.
Sure.
I think that's what they call this type of film, and it actually feels a lot more like a stage play in a lot of ways. Pretty much 95% of it takes place in one room, and it's all this kind of emotional tension / human drama between this group of people in this one singular room. So it's almost like one of those, they put a bunch of people in the room, throw some wild shit at them and see how they like tear each other apart kind of thing. But I'll read the IMDb brief plot synopsis here, which I think sums it up pretty well. 5 military veterans, best friends since childhood, which I didn't necessarily glean that they were all best friends since childhood. Like, I don't know if that's something that...
Yeah,
like
I didn't get that either.
Certainly from the war and potentially even relationships from pre-war, but best friends since childhood seems like a stretch. But anyway, they gathered...
Especially with Bob. Bob is the far outsider from everybody.
Yes, agreed. So they gather together to support their troubled host. That would be Hawk, played by Larry Fessenden. And the metaphoric ghosts of their past become all too literal.
Wow.
So Brooklyn 45, it takes place in Brooklyn in 1945. Also, there is a gun at play, which appears to be a 45 caliber semi-automatic handgun. So I think that probably has something to do with it as well.
Yeah.
But it takes place, I think it was the 27th of December. It's between Christmas and New Year's. And essentially what they're saying is Hawk, Larry Fessenden's character, invites the rest of them there. Again, Marla, played by Ann Ramsey, Bob, played by Ron Entertainment Reigns. They are a couple, married couple. Anne is a veteran of the military, was in the war, but she is known as, they establish very clearly and almost overly established that she's like extremely intelligent and a military intelligence officer type of person. And specifically her specialty is that she is the U.S. Army's best interrogator.
Yeah. Marla the Merciless.
Right. Marla the Merciless, they call her. She is America's greatest interrogator. Right. Bob so she is this very like strong, cunning type of person, but generally speaking, like a very kind of warm character. She's obviously, dealing with some sort of wound or something, like physical disability. She's got a cane. She walks with a limp that presumably happened during the war. And Bob is her more kind of mild mannered husband. Pencil pusher kind of character, they refer to him as.
Which I have a theory about Bob.
Oh,
but we can talk about it a little bit later. But
that sounds like a movie from 2013, A Theory About Bob.
It's the sequel starring Bill Murray.
Yeah. No. Okay. All right. I'm interested to hear that. Yeah. They are showing up to Hawk's house, Larry Fessenden's character, who was kind of the superior officer for, assumedly a whole host of people. It's his house. He is struggling. You pretty quickly are able to glean from exposition, and there is a lot of exposition dumping that happens in the first 10 to 15 minutes of this movie. It almost feels pretty heavy-handed, I would say, in the amount of exposition you're getting, but that his wife had committed suicide. You don't get all the details. At first, you're like, oh, she's gone. And then it becomes pretty clear that through some, like I said, some turns of phrase that are used, that she committed suicide. And he's in a bad place, and he's drinking his face off, and he's invited them all here for support or, under the guise of like a holiday gathering kind of thing. Jeremy Holmes' character, Archie, is the kind of all-American boy, tough guy, leatherneck, soldier type, big strapping son of a bitch. He's the, point him at the enemy and he's going to go kill him. The pretty quickly they establish, which is the kind of, I don't want to say twist, but the idea, especially in 1945, that he is at least amongst his friends, out of the closet. He's out of the closet gay, which would have been, quite a a stance to take in 1945, especially as in the military. But it is well established and understood and accepted, amongst this group of friends. Of course, there is a lot of kind of gay bashing in a somewhat friendly way, but then also in a not friendly way towards him. And he seems to be pretty comfortable, with his sexual identity, and most of the rest of them do. But, specifically Paul, which we'll talk about in a second, like kind of uses as a weird thing to like lord over him. Then you have Paul, who's the major. Paul is like, a superior officer, but not ranking as high as Hawk. And he is Hawk's best friend. He mentions 90 times that they're best friends. Yeah.
So the breakdown goes, and I think this is how they all kind of meet each other, is that like Hawk is the colonel, and so he was in direct command of Archie and Paul.
Mm-hmm.
And I think Paul, like, even though Paul and Archie both address each other as major,
mm-hmm.
I think at some point Paul also was Archie's commanding officer.
That was the thing that it felt like to me as well, but they had the same rank, so it was a little confusing.
Yeah, and I think it's just because of Archie's actions,
mm-hmm.
he gets promoted up to major, because he seems younger than it obviously Hawk and Paul.
Yeah. They come in, under the guise of, and they a holiday gathering. There's a lot of pleasantries. They pretty quickly jump to the punch, which is things ain't going so good for old Colonel Hawk. He's really struggling, and it has been, at this point, it was Thanksgiving morning that his wife committed suicide. You come to learn that she slashed her wrist. And you start to pick up pieces of what was happening with her. And really, you come to realize, one of two things. And there's two kind of simultaneous narratives going on. One is that she was struggling with mental illness. And the other thing is that she either had delusions that some of her neighbors were Nazi spies, or she knew something everyone else didn't, and she wasn't struggling with mental illness, and they were in fact Nazi spies. She was trying to tell everyone that would listen. She was being, written off as, struggling with mental illness. And of course, in 1945, that would have been even much more stigmatized than it is now. So ultimately, that drove her to commit suicide. So Hawk is struggling, decides, hey, I'm hurting here. He talks about this path he went down of, kind of turning to Jeebus, and going to church and all this stuff. And then kind of had a collapsing of his faith when, a priest told him his wife was in hell because she committed suicide. He wasn't able to deal with that. Ultimately, he has learned that, something about seances and summoning, spirits of the dead and all that sort of thing. And he convinces with this, prolonged sob story that everyone needs to, humor him and participate in a seance.
It's one of those things where, like, he's, like you're saying, like the stigma behind mental illness back then
mm-hmm.
would have been so great that, like, you would rather believe, because if you don't, like, that person is going to wind up locked away forever.
Yeah.
So you have to hold on longer in believing that person isn't crazy, to keep them, like, from being thrown away. Like,
yeah, the stakes are so high to call that card. You know what I mean? That you'll try to believe almost anything and keep that as an absolute last resort. The interesting thing about this is they start to perform this seance, and almost immediately shit starts happening. Like this, there is this kind of, I think the movie moves fast at this point because they want to get to the action, and the spookies, but in doing so, they definitely really dump a lot of exposition in a short amount of time, which I think is to the end of, hey, let's get on with the spookies, and ramp the tension up pretty quick, which they do successfully. But during the seance early on, you start to hear some noises, some weird old noises, something rattling around, in the room somewhere. And then you're like, oh, this could be just, could be anything, right? Could be, some sort of, it just sounds like a rattling noise, in a closet, right? Which ultimately becomes the case. But then a dang old ghost arm fucking comes up out of the table. Like, it really goes into the full on supernatural very quickly.
Yeah. I think the progression of this seance scene is so great, especially because the way the closet plays into it.
Yeah.
And then, the way Hawk's just like, ignore the closet, but focus on the seance.
Yeah.
And then,
so he knows something that everybody else doesn't.
Right. Yeah. And then just the way the ghost arm appears, it reminded me so much of the way they do the ghost effects in Ghostbusters.
Exactly what I was going to say. It reminds me so much of Ghostbusters. The way it's just like manifesting like through the surface, almost like it's a puddle or a pool or something like that. Mm-hmm. Just really was reminiscent of Ghostbusters.
Yeah. the way the effect is done is like so Ghostbusters. The other thing it reminded me of is, I don't know if you've seen it, but the film Extraordinary, which was...
Is that the one? Yeah. Is that the one where there's like the guy with the afro is the ghost, and is that what it
was? No.
Okay, we're thinking about something else then. Okay.
No.
I don't think I've seen Extraordinary.
Extraordinary is the one with Will Forte.
Oh.
I think it's either Irish or British. I forget.
I did not see it, but I do remember the previews, and I remember that being one of the movies. It's a TV show, isn't it though?
No. It was a movie.
Oh, okay. I was thinking it was a TV show. I just remember the Will Forte and like seeing the previews and going like, that looks fun, and then I never watched it.
Yeah, it is. It's a great movie, but like one of the things in that movie is the ghosts manifest as like basically this big giant ball of snot.
Yeah,
exactly as the way Hawk coughs it up. So It's like, I was like, did Ted just rip that off from Extraordinary? Because he just coughs up ghost slime.
He just barfs up a big ghost loogie on the desk, or on the table rather.
Yeah.
So, and that there is some speculation about, and there is some like, the plot is a little spotty, I would say, in this movie, to the point where like they intentionally don't explain some things. So they leave you in the dark on some stuff intentionally so that you feel a little bit of confusion along with the characters, which I like. But ultimately there are some like, I don't know if I would even say plot holes, but just some stuff they're like, okay, well, why did that happen if this was the case? You know what I mean? Which I guess we'll get to, but Hawk coughs up some dang old ghost snot, and he's talking a lot about, hey, we can't, it's almost a trope in, supernatural seance type movies where it's like, or when, satanic rituals or supernatural, rituals are happening, where it's like, you gotta properly close the gate or else you leave it open and then all kind of bad stuff can happen. Like that's a pretty established trope. Mm-hmm. But you never really, I guess that is just a little bit the inciting incident where like the circle of the seance is broken. So now the ghosts, the spirits, whatever they are, can kind of pop out and manifest themselves in a lot of different ways. So when they kind of break the circle of the seance, if you will, and the ghost arm, kind of goes back in, then all of a sudden Hawk is like, wow, okay, that just proved there is an afterlife. And, that means that there is heaven and hell or whatever, and now I can go see my wife, whose name is Susan, who they all know and have like affection for, but are all kind of torn on whether or not she was. It seems to be generally accepted that she was mentally ill, but not by everybody.
Right. It's one of those things that like not everybody is saying it out loud.
Yeah.
I did like though how like in this seance, after like the arm comes out and like they hear the voices and everything, everybody at the table accepts that like ghosts are real, and the people who knew her, which would have been Marla and Paul, they both recognize it as Susie. So it's nice that you don't have a character that is like full of disbelief of the supernatural after it happens right in front of them.
Yeah, because that usually you do get that.
Yeah,
in this type of story.
So, right, and so they reserve like the disbelief for the next thing that comes up, which is a German lady falls out of the closet, which was banging. yeah, which you don't see that coming. It's like, okay, whoa, all right, we got some supernatural things going. All right, sick. And then all of a sudden it does become this like a little bit of a whodunit type of mystery, because Christina Kleeb's character, Hildegard Baumann, they call Hildy, who is this German immigrant, speaks with a strong German accent, and they came up with the most German name they could, just pops out of the closet and she's like tied up in some capacity. So this is I don't know if we completely mentioned it, but this is after Hawk also shoots himself. Yeah, we didn't get that far yet. Yeah, sorry, I kind of skipped that pretty big part. So what happens is Hawk kind of says like, oh, there is a heaven and hell, and Susie is in the afterlife, so bye, and just blows his brains out. Just pulls out his service revolver and in a pretty graphic fashion just blows his brains out to the surprise of everybody. Yeah, which this is the one thing I didn't like. It's not that I didn't like that he like accepts that there is an afterlife and that he's going to go see his wife. It's the fact that like right before he does it, he says he's the one that says, oh, we can still continue the seance. Yeah, he's basically like, let's get things going again. Like, yeah, we just proved it. That was her. And even like Marla even says like, I smelled her perfume, and they all are in agreement, like you mentioned, that it was Susie. So why would he not want to talk to her? But yeah, he pretty abruptly changes his mind, is like, pulls a, he's moving on up, he's like, I'm coming. No, wait, no, I'm mixing up my sitcoms. I'm mixing up the Jeffersons and Red Fox in what the hell is that called? Sanford and Son. Right. Sanford and Son. Red Fox is the one who had the heart attack and said he's coming. He's coming up for Elizabeth. The Jeffersons. I'm pretty sure the Jeffersons were the ones that got the move away from the racist family.
Yeah, I think I might be racist for confusing those two black sitcoms. Sorry, guys.
No, you just have weed brain.
I do have that too. Anyway,
just the fact that you're able to remember both of them is,
that's a good sign. That's a good sign. I've got some functioning brain cells. But yes, I immediately thought of, even when I was watching, I immediately thought of, I'm coming, Elizabeth. I'm coming. I fucking love Sanford Son. It's so funny. Anyway, and then he just, he just checks out. Which, was a little, obviously he wasn't in the right mind. They do mention that he was hammered drunk. Like, oh yeah. Like Paul talks about, like they all get there. It's well into the evening. You assume it's, I don't know. It's dark out. It's into the evening. And Paul mentions, they established that Paul's been there since 2 p.m. So they've been hitting the sauce.
Yeah. Apparently he's put down 2/5. Hawk has.
That's what they mentioned. I'm like, Jesus Christ.
Yeah, that's a lot. Even in my heyday, I would only drink one.
Yeah, that's an intense amount of booze. But listen, them World War II era drinking, that was a whole different ball game, I think.
Fair enough.
Anyway, so he checks the fuck out. Everyone's like, Jesus Christ, what happened? What's happening? Why did that happen? Everyone's reeling still. And then, Hildy falls out of the closet tied up, and then she pops up. And obviously with this thick accent, and she says who she is. And Paul's like, "You're dang old Kraut." And he just keeps calling her a Kraut, which, like, I guess that is, was definitely like a derogatory term for Germans during the time, like, during and post World War II. But I don't know. I just felt like they leaned into that slang term really, really hard.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know another one though. You know what I'm saying?
What do you guess? I mean, besides just Nazi, like, they're accusing her of being a Nazi. But they're like, "Goddamn Kraut, sons of bitches." Blah, blah, blah. They just say Kraut like a lot. And then it was making me hungry because I love Kraut so much.
Yeah.
But
I mean, anything else would sound silly. You can't call her Spetzel pants, you know?
That's good. Yeah. You're not going to call her old schnitzel bottom or whatever.
Yeah.
But
doesn't sound tough at all.
No, it doesn't. It doesn't even sound derogatory. It sounds like a term of endearment. But anyway, he is pretty quickly like, "Hey, what's going on with this Kraut popping out of the closet? What the fuck?" And Paul goes from 0 to 60 because they establish pretty quickly, and Hildy explains that these fucking crazy people, meaning Hawk and Susie, thought that her and her family were Nazi spies and had been, essentially harassing them, making their life miserable. And ultimately that day, I assume it happened earlier that day, Hawk kidnapped her and tied her up and put her in the closet. And she's like, "What the fuck? Why am I here?" Well, she doesn't know. They are like, "Why are you here?" And she explains what happened, that he abducted her basically, and believes that she's responsible for Susie's suicide, and and that she is in fact a Nazi spy. Paul is very quick to want to believe Hawk because, again, as he mentions for the 40th time, they're best friends, and he's one of the smartest, most upstanding people ever, and obviously he trusts his judgment, and he believes that she is in fact a spy. Everyone else is like, "You're fucking nuts." Paul pretty quickly grabs the gun that Hawk shot himself with, and starts kind of holding everyone up and basically saying, like, "We're gonna," he is saying he's gonna kill Hildy because she is in fact, he believes her to be a Nazi spy.
Yeah, which is real good, like, chain of command psychology on the part of, like, the character interaction between Paul and Hawk. Is that, like, Paul would think just because Hawk was a higher rank than him, he would automatically just fall in line of like, "Oh yeah, he's got to be smarter and better and everything else than me," because we still believe in meritocracy at this point. Yeah. So, of course my superior is better than me in every way.
This can't be that flawed. That logic can't be flawed. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. His wife can't be insane because he knows better than I know. And so I have to listen to everything he has said.
Right. And Archie is definitely has been programmed by the military to also believe that, but his better judgment is peeking out above that and saying, like, "Well, maybe not." Right. We should also mention that Archie, they do make mention of the fact that Archie is about to go in front of some sort of grand jury or something. Or maybe it's a military tribunal. I don't know. He's about to go in front of, he's about to go to court in some capacity to defend himself because he has been accused of war crimes. You don't know what those war crimes are, but everyone is basically saying, with the exception of Bob, who's the outlier, basically says, "Fuck that guy. He's a war criminal." And even Marla's like, "No, he didn't do it." And you don't know what it is. But so you have that foreshadowing happening as well.
Yeah. And just a like a fun kind of like costuming note, if you look at everybody and just kind of where their mentality is, Hawk and Paul are the only ones still in military dress.
Mm-hmm.
Like Hawk is wearing his fatigues and Paul is in full, done up. It's got his like service
his
jacket
officer
on.
uniform and everything. Yeah.
And then everybody else is like, everybody else is dressed pretty normally, and their mentality is more shifted towards the war is over. Whereas these other two guys, the war isn't over for them.
Right. Exactly. And there's a ton of social commentary here on obviously the the traumas of war, PTSD, all that sort of thing, but also xenophobia and paranoia and mental illness and these like other types of social stigmas, certainly exacerbated by the fact that it's 1945. But yeah, so I guess I'll jump ahead a little bit here because there's a lot of back and forth. There's a lot of posturing. There's a lot of power dynamic things between like Archie, Paul, them belittling Bob because Bob is not the real man that they believe themselves to be, and then Marla, who you pretty much has established the entire time that everyone very much respects her intellect and everyone is kind of pushing their agendas forward, but ultimately you get the feeling that she is going to supersede most everything that's happening if she feels the need to, kind of. But she's kind of playing the diplomat a little bit in the whole, like, scope of the chamber drama, if you will. And then Hildegard is basically just sitting there, just pleading her case. This is crazy. Let me go. But she is being very tactful and almost sly in a way where you're not, as the viewer, convinced that she's not a spy.
Yeah, and it's interesting, and like they have her like because she's German, they can get away with her like misspeaking. Like she doesn't have the full American lexicon that she would know. Some words would trigger a different connotation than another.
Right.
So they can get away with that. Another interesting note, though, that plays into like her innocence is her last name is Ballman, which is a very kind of it's a German surname, but it's also a historically Jewish surname.
Okay.
So she's unlikely to be a Nazi spy with a Jewish surname, and also the translation of the name translates directly to neighbor or citizen.
Okay. Yeah. That makes sense.
So, it just a couple like little clues dusted in there to make you think about who this person is. No, that's good idea. I didn't pick up on that. So they get these kind of, again, it's this classic kind of the things you would expect in this type of like tight little, almost Clue like, chamber drama thing. And then another bit of a twist happens where your boy Hawk, Larry Fessenen's character, who done shot his brains out, is now starting to talk. And he decides I'm not dead. LOL.
LOL, JK, BRB. I'm back. And then does a lot of a grunting and basically saying like, kill her, like ordering Paul to shoot Hildy. And everyone's like, no, don't do it. And what the fuck is that corpse talking for? And, and all this. So it's creating a lot more confusion and hysteria amongst the ranks. And then, at some point, we should mention that Paul has the key to the door. They try to basically, several of them try to fuck off soon after Hawk shoots himself, and they realize the doors to the parlor that they're in are locked. And Paul, right before or around the time that Hildy busts out of the closet, he finds the key on Hawk, and then also, like I said, procures his gun. And at some point, they basically say, Paul's like, I'm not letting you guys out of here. We need to hash this out. We need to figure out if she's a Nazi spy. And they're all like, you're crazy. Let us out. Bob is especially kind of hysterical about wanting to get out of this room. Ultimately, the way that Marla, and I'm jumping ahead a little bit, kind of chooses to satisfy Paul and Archie, for that matter, who's kind of like on the fence a little bit, because he is really, you establish, and you come to learn really the gritty details of Archie really was Clive's, for lack of a better term, hired gun. He was the guy in battle that, his superior officer pointed him in a direction and said, kill, and he did it. So he kind of has this facade of like this war hero because he killed so many of the enemy, and, and was this like, it's almost represented as this like, super soldier-y type of guy. And then you start to, the story of Paul and even more so Hawk starts to unravel when everyone kind of admits that Hawk was full of shit.
Yeah. And it also comes about because Paul is the one who drops the bomb that Archie was the one who blew up the school.
Yes. He ultimately does.
Yeah.
That.
I didn't love the way Paul dropped that either, because it just comes really, I don't know. It felt like forced or ham-fisted in a way, because it starts with just like an argument between Archie and Paul. And like Archie it's over Archie's homosexuality.
Yeah.
And, they're arguing back and forth about that. And then Archie's like, hey, Paul, rein it in. We're on the same side, that this, that Hildy's a Nazi. Stop coming after me.
Yeah.
Or, you're going to find out what's up.
Yeah.
And then Paul's like, yeah, okay. Yeah. Thanks for reminding me we're on the same side, baby butcher. And it just the way, like, there wasn't any other kind of like nickname that Paul had been calling Archie. Like if he had been calling him Butch the entire time.
Yeah, it was a little heavy-handed.
Yeah, but if he was like calling him Butch the entire time, you could have gotten it that like Butch was a nickname that was based on his homosexuality. Mm-hmm. Not a nickname as in butcher.
Right. Yeah, that would have been probably a more tactful way of like slowly letting that out. But yeah, it comes abruptly.
Yeah, it's just so abrupt. And I think it's just, again, just to move. A lot of this stuff happens really abrupt to move things along. But I think I think some of these details could have been let out on a drip rather than a full faucet. Mm-hmm. So... But yeah,
that's a good point. Yeah, they come out and basically say that like Paul has agreed to basically, lie on the stand for Archie and defend him in this war crimes trial, in saying that he didn't realize. But then Archie, after, Paul really provokes him, he explains what happened, which was they were in a dire situation where they were getting picked off by enemy snipers, and Hawk basically again pointed Archie in the direction and said, hey, this was established that it was a school, and it was actually like a children's shelter that happened to be a bird's nest for these snipers that were picking them off, and Hawk's direction was for him to go in and blow up the school and kill all these kids, and they did it knowingly. And it was one of these things where they felt at the time that the ends justified the means to save, to get out of the situation they were in. And it was one of those classics, like, I was just following orders kind of situation. But there's a whole narrative that comes to fruition very much in the end, in the climax of the film, which is this kind of personal responsibility narrative as well, which I guess we'll talk about in a second. But that's something that like Archie's ultimately having to come to terms with. And Paul also holds that over his head. because once they do, ultimately, what Marla does is she goes through this interrogation technique with Hildy, where she basically like sticks a pin in her finger and forces her to like be in a situation where she might confess that she's a Nazi or give up some information, and she doesn't. But there's also this underlying underlying like understanding, I guess, that Marla does not believe Hildy is a Nazi and is ultimately doing this just as like a bit of theater to satisfy Paul.
Yeah. Like for the most part, most people aren't aware of Marla's tactics.
Yeah.
And so like she can kind of get away with doing the bare minimum, but she still does like a fair amount of like torturous, work to Hildy's hand.
Yeah. But she kind of communicates that she's on her side, right, and that she's just doing this to basically save her life. But she already believes her, basically. She kind of coaches her, and she's like, look, don't make this worse than it has to be. I believe you, but like just stick with me for this minute, and I'll get you through it, but it's gonna suck. This is gonna suck, but it'll save your life ultimately. Yeah. So once they establish that she's not a Nazi, Paul's not satisfied, and ultimately holds the whole story and his willingness to vouch for Archie during this, what is, I guess we should probably specify too, is like a high profile thing. Like they hear about it on the radio, that Archie is this war hero that is going on trial for war crime. So it's like, it's a high profile thing that's in the media. Ultimately, this thing kind of goes on for a while. They eventually do unlock the door, or the door kind of sucks in the key. And then they ultimately come to this like kind of fever pitch where Hawk's corpse, which has been grunting and saying things to them and demanding that they kill Hildy, starts smashing its face against the table like repeatedly in a and I just watched Jacob's Ladder last night, which is I wouldn't compare these two movies, but it did remind me of some of the scenes in the kind of climactic scene in that movie where they're in the like I guess it's hell or what, I don't know. But when they're the inmates of the hypothetical asylum are like smashing their heads off the wall and shit, I couldn't help but think about that. But it's a really cool, because at this point, like there's some supernatural stuff. There's some gory stuff. Like I said, you're seeing a big hole in the back of his head, and they even kind of examine it, and there's blood of blood and that sort of thing. But overall, it's been more of a psychological drama than a horror.
Yeah, it's not until I would say it's after the torture scene, the Susie's ghost reappears. Yes.
Is that now? Does the ghost reappear before the face smashing or after? I can't remember.
Oh, okay. Yeah. It's after the interrogation scene, because then they decide to they recommit to finishing the seance.
Right. Yes. You're right.
And then the power goes out, and the ghost shows up, and the ghost essentially undoes everything they learned in the interrogation, because the ghost accuses Hildy of killing her.
Right. Of literally sneaking into her house and cutting her wrists and making it look like a suicide.
Right. Which Paul was already not believing the interrogation, but this affirms for him that, okay, here's Susie, the wife of the person I respect the most.
Yeah.
So I'm going to take the ghost over what, the play interrogation I just saw.
Right. And then, but again, he's still the only one that's really convinced at this point. They're all pretty freaked out because the ghost, and mind you, it's a dang old ghost, but she's pretty, even for a ghost, she seems pretty unstable. Like, you know what I mean? Like, she's kind of ranting and raving a little bit. The ghost of Susie and is accusing her of killing her, and you did this and all this stuff. But there's still like an underlying theme of like, you still don't believe the ghost. You know what I mean?
I mean, yeah. Because why would you believe the ghost? I mean, it's kind of the beauty of the film is like you can really pick anybody's side that you want to.
Yeah.
And because you learn more about how untrustworthy Hawk is with the way, he told tall tales and was really just the guy who was too cowardly to do any of the killing himself, that he sent everybody to do it for him.
Right.
So you just learn more and more about every character. And so you're willing to go kind of on the ride of back and forth of like, is Hildy really, a spy or not?
Yeah. And the most interesting thing is when you think about somebody, passing on to the afterlife, I guess there is some assumption that they will receive some sort of clarity. And for somebody who was, and not to be derogatory, but, kind of a raving lunatic during life, and then to remain a raving lunatic in death is like kind of an unnerving thing. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And it's one of those things that like, oh, maybe like you don't get that reward of clarity. Cause like also she looks like a sea hag.
She does. She's disheveled. So
like, it's not like she got, a paradise like afterlife.
Right.
She's not in like the form that everybody reminds her or remembers her as.
Mm-hmm.
She's in like this bloated, drenched sea hag corpse.
Yeah.
That is, ranting and raving. And like they even cut to, they show essentially what are photos of Susie, in better days a lot of the time. So you would think if like she achieved a happy afterlife, she would look like that. And she would, hover over the table and say, hello, all my friends. Welcome. I'm doing cool. Bye.
Yeah. Oh, by the way, that German, that Kraut did murder me, so maybe you figure that out. Bye. No, it's like
she really did do that.
No, it's ranting and raving and frankly like approaching it in a very unreliable way still. Like she dead and she's still cray. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, so obviously you're not really believing her at this point. And but anyway, soon thereafter, when they're still kind of debating on what to do and arguing and all that stuff, Hawk, again, there's a really cool, not by any means perfect, but just really well placed practical effect with Hawk smashing the corpse, sitting up, and then repeatedly smashing with a lot of violent force its face off the table until its face starts to just like distort into this like clay, like flat, it's just smashing its face flat against the table. It's borderline comical, but
it's funny you say clay because, like, now that I think about it, it really does look like Clayface from the Batman cartoon.
It does, with like the no chin at all, just completely flat, and then his head almost does become a little bit like a mountain, like
yeah. And then like the teeth are all like all over the place and sticking
look like
out.
A graveyard, which is very Clayface as well. But yeah, and they're just like goo, just watching him smash his face off the table. And then, and I don't think I'm mixing up the sequence of this, the sequence too much, but there's kind of a, for lack of a better term, a coming to Jesus moment for Archie, where he's basically, I guess, coming to terms with what he did. And ultimately, I think what they're trying to portray is that he is finally taking personal responsibility for what he did. And so, or perhaps this is even part of the reason for him doing that is the doors kind of magically unlock for him. And when he opens them up, he gets a glimpse into hell, presumably, which is this like it was cool. I like it was a bold swing, but it is this kind of like weird CGI screamy hell kind of thing. Which I know it would have been a big ask, but boy, how cool would it have been if that was just like practical and it was basically like he opens the door and it looks, like when Bill Murray looks under the Ghost of Christmas Future's, gown. It's like, that would have been even cooler. But, you get this, and I don't even remember necessarily what was happening. There was like, I think there was a head. There was like, I don't know.
I think a lot of it is actually practical in a lot of ways. It's just what's happening is like it's definitely he is being shown the hell of going back to the
that's right,
the school.
So there's a bunch of burnt limbs popping up and a face or two, and assumedly it is his victims that he blew up in the school bombing situation.
Yeah. And so like, I think you get a couple like of those puppets, and then like there is like a lot of CGI like embers and like other stuff built around it.
That's right.
But,
that's right. Yeah, I'm probably not giving it enough credit because it was now that you say that, I do remember there was some what looked to be some practical like limbs and things like that kind of mixed in with the CGI. But anyway, so that's a pretty rude awakening for our boy Archie. And I don't think I'm missing too much, but I'm jumping forward just a little bit at the point when I might even be stepping back a second, but at the point where Hawk's character is smashing his face off the table, they all kind of simultaneously are like, okay, we getting the fuck up out of here. And they all try to, they've established the door won't open, but they start trying to break the windows. I think even, at this point, I don't remember who has the gun because it does change hands a couple times.
Yeah. So you're definitely jumping back.
Yeah.
It's like after Archie sees this vision of hell and like they've broken the seance and everything. And this is also before the Hawk starts smashing his head. Mm-hmm. Paul he decides he's just going to choke Hildy to death.
Yes. I forgot
he's
about
just going to strangle her. He's just going to strangle her straight up.
I knew there was an incident that I was forgetting. Yeah.
Yeah. So while Paul's strangling Hildy, Archie tries to stop Paul, and then Archie has the gun on him, which is at this point that Bob grabs the gun off of Archie and takes control.
Right. Yeah. And Bob, as a reminder, has been kind of the meek and mild, husband of Marla at this point. And now all of a sudden he's just, he's fed up and he's got a little bit of a crazed look in his eye type of situation. And he's like, fuck all this noise. I got to get out of here kind of thing. So,
yeah. So this is my theory on Bob I think Bob is OSS.
Oh, okay.
I'm grasping at straws probably. But I'm just putting a lot together because Bob is actually the character we know the least about.
Yes, correct.
Like, nothing is really ever revealed about him. So I'm thinking Bob is like OSS, which is like pre-CIA. But they make mentions of things like he works at the Pentagon. And
they do. You're right.
And then like how they never make mention of like how he got into a relationship with Marla. And like I'm also I guess I'm sort of assuming Marla is also OSS because she was intelligence and interrogation.
Yeah, it does seem it is pretty clear that Marla had some sort of like high security clearance type of role. Like she was a well-known entity to the entire US military.
Right. And she was like stationed at a base, but like I don't think they ever mention a rank for her or anything.
Yeah.
So I think she was probably part of the OSS that was deployed and then stationed into a base for intelligence and interrogation. And then that's probably where she met Bob, is like maybe they met at like an OSS training camp or something like that, and then they came together that way. But then like another hint that Bob kind of drops is like at the very beginning of the film, they make mention of Marla's interrogation techniques.
Mm-hmm.
And I think Archie calls it torture. It's either Archie or Hawk calls it torture, and then Bob is quickly to dismiss. He says it's not torture, it's interrogation. It's, so like he is completely cool with, he's both aware of her techniques and is completely cool with them,
Mm-hmm.
which is something that he would be if he was also trained that way as an OSS agent.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good point. I think that's a valid theory because, yeah, you definitely intentionally don't know much about Bob. And, if you, when you've seen a lot of movies like this, you do ultimately expect that Bob is going to come back around as playing a bigger role than he seems to play.
Right.
So
if he's not killed off in the first 15, then he has value elsewhere.
Right. Something big is going to happen with Bob. And ultimately it does, but it never really, there's never a big reveal for Bob. So like, no. I wonder, like what you're saying makes sense. And I wonder if it was something that got, I don't want to assume anything, that it got cut or anything, but it does feel like there maybe was more to the Bob story that didn't make it to the final cut. I don't know.
Yeah. And then my final hint, which is actually what got me started on thinking this way, is when Bob's holding the gun, he's holding it in like a kind of a trained way, because he's holding it two-handed with one hand over the other.
Yeah.
If you were somebody who had never held a gun before, you wouldn't be holding it the way Bob does. You'd be holding it like one-handed and your hands would be shaking. Like his hands aren't really shaking when he's pointing the gun at Paul.
No.
So I don't know. Yeah, I think he had some sort of OSS training, and it's not until what he ultimately does that like he is affected by what he does.
Yeah. And I guess like I don't know if there's really anything between where we're at now and talking about that. But ultimately Bob takes control. He's got the gun and he's like, I got to do something. Y'all are fucking up. And Paul tries to, play, gamble, but in a, hey, listen, I'm a big dog, Bob. He doesn't take him seriously at all. I'm just going to go and take the gun away from Bob. As he grabs the gun, Bob blows Paul's fingers off. Yeah. And then you're like, God damn. And he's like, you blow my dang old fingers off. And and there's like, and you think that's going to be the big part of it. That's the big thing that's going to happen. But then he just turns around and just pops Paul right between the eyes.
Yeah. Well, I mean, Paul's pissed and he comes at him again and says, I'm going to kill you. He says, I'm going to kill you. So
he does say that. Yeah. So it's a bit of a stand and defend situation there with Bob. So he's like, oh, you're going to kill me. Okay. And he shoots him. You're like, all right. So that was potentially in self-defense, but yeah, it's a shocking moment because Bob has been so mild mannered up till this point. And then everyone's like, oh, great. That guy's dead. Like not everyone, but like Hildy especially is like, thank you. Good thing that guy's dead. And then to everyone's surprise, Bob turns and shoots Hildy in the head as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you're like, oh, goddamn, is Bob going berserker mode here?
Right.
Or what? But then you realize that, and Bob says right off the bat that, he makes a comment that's something like, I had to do it. And that tells you that was a calculated move on Bob's part. It wasn't just weird berserker Bob mode.
Right.
And he, and then the door, that kind of breaks the spell, if you will. The whatever type of, I don't know a better word besides like a spell that they were involved in, that maybe the seance opened up, assumedly the seance opened up. And basically he ultimately gave in and did the will of Hawk and Susie, assuming that Susie in the afterlife had basically locked them in this room until Hildy was killed.
Right.
And the way I took it, and maybe I'm off on this, but this is the way I took it. But there's still some holes for me. Is this was obviously a plan that Hawk had, right? He would not have offed himself and left Hildy in the closet if he didn't think, if he didn't like basically set up the dominoes and flick the first one, you know? So I took this as Hawk obviously believed his wife that Hildy was in fact a Nazi spy, and ultimately Hildy was responsible for his wife's death. He decided, if I can verify that Hildy is in the afterlife and there is a heaven or an afterlife of some capacity, that I can get there to reunite with her, then I want to do that. However, if I kill Hildy, I'm going to hell, or I'm not going to necessarily go to the place where Susie is.
No, I don't think it's that.
Well, then why didn't he just kill Hildy himself? Why did he lock her in the closet?
Well, because they said it earlier that like he's never been the killer.
He's just scared to do it.
Yeah, he's a fucking pussy. He can't stand blood.
Gotcha.
That's why Paul was there earlier than everybody else.
Oh, yeah. That makes more sense. Yep.
It may or may not have been Hawk's plan to fucking kill himself.
Okay. Yeah.
But like it was always the plan for Paul to kill Hildy. So
yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
So,
that makes more sense.
Yeah, I don't think he would have thought about it that way of like, if I kill Hildy, I can't go to wherever my wife is, because I mean, it's very Catholic for that. You know, the one thing you can't do is kill yourself, because you go, that's automatic hell.
Yeah.
That's double hell sometimes.
Yeah, double hell. No, you're right. That makes a lot more sense. Yeah, I didn't think that through very well. So yeah, he is too squeamish to do what he thinks needs done. So he's going to do the thing he always did in war, which is, point one of his, human weapons towards her. But then he ultimately decided he was gonna off himself in that moment and reunite with her in some capacity.
Right.
So, okay. I guess the assumption still is that Susie had some sort of control over the situation, or they gave her power by opening up the gates with the seance for her to basically put them in some scenario where they can't leave until Hildy dies.
Right. And I mean, even Hawk says it at the beginning before the seance is like, you guys can't leave this room until it's done.
Yeah.
And I think, again, even though I think everybody else in that scene is thinking he means the seance, I think he's probably referencing killing Hildy. So
yeah. So ultimately, everyone is, the finger is kind of being pointed at Archie and I guess to a lesser extent at Paul. But the whole idea is like, Archie, you took, you didn't take responsibility for what you did. You're saying, hey, I was just following orders, which is, of course, a turn of phrase that is oftentimes associated with the Nazis,
right.
And obviously, concentration camps and all that sort of thing, is that we were just following orders kind of thing. That was like the defense for a lot of, German, Nazi soldiers during World War II. And, I guess the narrative was turning the mirror back around on Archie, and saying, yeah, well, you did the same thing, fuckwad. You killed a bunch of kids because you thought, your superior officer told you to do it. And then ultimately that judgment that is being placed on Archie, which he ultimately takes responsibility for, eventually gets turned back around on Bob as well. So, basically immediately upon killing Hildy, things go back to normal. They're able to exit the room. And then they're just like, let's gather our coats and peace out. Like kind of in a little bit of a, like you would think you'd walk out of that, like, you know, Ash from the Evil Dead, you know, you're like battered and bruised and, you know, a pretty intense thing just happened. And they're just like, let's get our coats. Wow, what a wacky evening. Let's grab a cab. You know what I mean? Kind of thing.
Yeah.
As they walk out and then they all have their little, so it almost felt dreamlike when they walked out. Except for only, you know, because it is the three of them walking out that walked in together.
Right. So yeah, and there's another interesting technical note about this is, I don't know if you noticed, but did you notice the aspect ratio changing?
No, didn't.
Yeah. So the film starts, I mean, it starts in black and white.
Yeah.
And it starts in a 4:3 aspect ratio, which would have been more common for the time back then.
Yeah.
And then it expands to a wide once they're inside the parlor.
Mm. Yeah, I guess I did kind of subconsciously recognize that because it also went color.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like you might have not have noticed, but your brain did.
Yeah, right.
But the expanding and contracting of the aspect ratio involves the three characters we're talking about. And it also involves in the hallway, there is a poster that is a remembrance of Pearl Harbor. And that kind of serves as an anchor to both open and close the aspect ratio. But like the aspect ratio is always 4:3 when they're outside. Mm. So it's in that, like you're saying, it's kind of like a return back to a narrow vision, a narrow mindedness. You know, they're back in the real world of 1945, where there's no ghosts and, you know, nobody knows kind of like what's going on inside of you. Nobody knows, you know, your crimes.
Yeah, what you've done, right? Yeah. So it's almost like, are you gonna, you know, and obviously that's a little bit of a, not a little bit, I would imagine, you know, quite a analogy to, you know, the soldiers returning from war. You know what I mean? Like they're returning from their own little kind of mini war, if you will, that happened inside that brownstone. And then the ultimate, you know, thing that Archie says is he is going to take the high road or the moral high road, in that he's going tomorrow to turn himself in and admit what he did and take responsibility for it. And that he's urging Bob to do the same. So yeah, the judginess, if you will, which is, I don't know, certainly justified judginess of Bob as they walked in saying, fuck, that guy's a war criminal. You know, they come out and he's faced what he did, or is prepared to face what he did. And now Bob's got to have that same internal conversation with himself. Yeah.
And again, they're mirroring each other in that way of Archie did what he did thinking it would end the war, and Bob does what he does thinking it also ends like this kind of like side war or the infection of the war. Because, you know, you think about it, like Susie infected Hawk with her paranoia. Like Hawk couldn't let go of the war, and he couldn't let go of his wife and, you know, her beliefs. So he was infected by it. And then Paul was infected by Hawk. So like by killing Paul, Bob, you know, kind of nips that in the bud. But then by also killing Hildy, nobody else is also going to suspect her.
Right.
So like it's not going to be a thing for anybody. It all ends right here. And then because Marla makes mention numerous times of like, you know, fuck the war. Why can't we just end the war? You know, the war's over. Let it go. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And then it's like this, ultimately this idea that there are the ends justifying the means rationale is not without, you know, personal penance kind of thing, I guess.
Right.
So now Bob's got to shoulder that burden in the same way that Archie came to the realization that he has to, shoulder that burden, and he can't plead ignorance, or can't plead duty, I guess, for the things that he's done. But yeah, and that's it. And there's obviously, as they kind of get back into the car, the way that they got out of the car, meaning Bob and Marla, was very lovey-dovey, and he's this, gentleman. Oh, I'm letting you out of the car, yo. And she's kind of like charmed by his like quaintness. On the way out, she's like, fuck yourself. And she's having very obviously conflicted thoughts or decidedly negative thoughts ultimately about what Bob did. So it's like this realist versus idealist type of thing, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah.
But anyway, and that is that's it. That's Brooklyn 45. Any additional comments? How'd you feel about it overall?
Yeah, overall, I think it's like a really fun kind of, like you're saying, because it's a chamber drama. Mm-hmm. It's a little different than what I think most people are expecting and used to. And because the supernatural elements don't play a whole lot into it until kind of the very end. Like it starts it off, the ghost kicks everything off, but it's really more Hildy falling out of the closet that initiates more of the dominoes falling. So yeah, it's I think it's still firmly like a horror movie because they're trapped under supernatural pretenses. Like they can't leave the room, they can't break the windows. So like they're just kind of all forced to deal with all of their character, flaws and what you learn about them. But it definitely plays out more like a play, like a stage play, than a classic horror movie. Yeah.
It's weird because I was looking just out of curiosity at some of the like reviews, even on like Letterboxd and even on Shudder and stuff like that. And it was a really weird, grading curve, if you will, for how people felt about this movie. Like I would say overwhelmingly it was positive. But very little super positive. I thought it was going to be very polarizing. Like some people are really going to dig this, and it's going to be their flavor. And then some people are going to super hate it because it does feel like a play, and it's not. It doesn't lean super heavily into the horror aspect and some traditional horror themes. But overall, it just felt like the vast majority of people were like, yeah, that was good.
Yeah.
Just like everyone felt like it was a 3 out of 5, a 3.5 out of 5. You know what I mean? It was just like everyone gave it a B+.
I think that's what I would do too. I would give it a B+. Like,
yeah, you have some outliers, right? There's people that are like, this is fucking boring and there's not even any boobs. I think I saw Danzig reviewed it and he said there wasn't enough boobs. But like,
they only showed the ghost twice and I ain't seen nobody's boobs. It ain't that good.
There wasn't any boobs, and the boobs that there wasn't even bloody. But yeah, it was like you see a couple of those, but overall just it was like people's consensus seemed to be like pretty standard, which is like that was good. It wasn't great, but it was good.
I mean a couple, just like a couple heavy-handed moments, that were just there to move the story along. Aside from that, there's a lot of interesting character drama to that, and they do some fun camera movement to tell you like, oh, here's a supernatural thing that's going to happen. Like anytime you see the camera start to cant to one side or the other, you're like, oh, ghost stuff's happening.
Yeah. That's a good subconscious ones. Yeah, that's not something I would necessarily pick up on, but yes. That is actually like kind of a weird trope that I guess I've never really consciously thought about, is that kind of like light slideways scrolling. You're like, oh, buddy, what's going to happen? It's almost like the eerie music cropping up in the background, but from a cinematography perspective.
Yeah, there's one that's like really, really obvious to look for. Is when Paul goes to put the key in the door and the door swallows the key. The camera angle is canting to a side, but they're intercutting with a 2-shot with him and Archie, and Paul's like centered directly in the frame, so it's like a real flat frame, intercut with like this twisting, spooky.
Oh yeah. I know what you're talking about now, because it's like from the perspective of almost like if it was somebody looking through a peephole from the other side of the door.
Right.
Yeah, that's cool. That's interesting. The more I learn about cinematography, the more ignorant I feel about movies in general. It's like, it's just such a thing that I just don't, I obviously you're a lot more like technically knowledgeable with this stuff. And like, I tend to be a lot more, that's like story driven, that's just the way I absorb movies. It's like music. Like some people listen to the lyrics and some people listen to the music, you know what I mean? Or lead with that kind of thing. And just like, that's never something that has been, it's just not my intuition to think about those things. So like having somebody point them out is always super interesting, because it's just like my brain just recognizes it, but it's just like, oh, movie magic is happening,
But that's always kind of the best cinematography is when you don't notice it, like, and it just affects you subconsciously, like when they can put it in there and you're like, yeah, okay, whatever. But like, like you're saying, like your brain recognizes like, oh, like these camera angles are off, or the aspect ratio is changing, unless you're like really sitting down to look for that stuff, you're not going to notice it. This goes the other way though. Like when you have a less competent director and a less like, somebody who's not as competent as Ted. And then you just notice how everything's flat and everything is on the mid horizon and everything is trash. Like,
oh yeah. That's like if I shot a movie, if I was behind the camera, everything would just be like framed up like it was a fucking senior photo shoot. Like it was
like that Flash movie is getting dragged to hell because like, I guess one of the big fight scenes in it is just like flat mid horizon, like nothing to look at, nothing's interesting, and it's just like So
well, that definitely worth a watch in my mind. I wouldn't say it has a lot of rewatchability. Probably not necessarily something I'm probably going to sit down and watch again, just because there is like I don't know if that has anything to do with like being a mystery element. Like I've watched the movie Clue 9 million times, but for whatever reason, it doesn't strike me as a movie that I'm going to revisit. But it was a fun watch, and it absolutely kept my attention the whole way through, and had some fun twists and turns. So I would definitely suggest checking it out if you haven't already. Even with even if you did listen before watching and got some spoilers, I think it's still definitely worth a watch. And remind everybody. If you got any ideas for some of them spooky, ooky Nickelodeon Halloween stuff, we're going to do a nice little change of pace for our July Showdown episode. So if you've got any things that, you think might not be on our radar that we should check out and consider for our picks for that Showdown episode in July, please throw them our way on the social medias. And as always, we always appreciate if you, give us a review on one of them social media, or, one of them podcatcher apps. Give us a whole 5-star or however many dang old stars they have review. I need to reorder some Halloween is Forever stickers, because I do believe I'm out of them, or very near out of them. So we can start sending some folks some stickers once again. And tune in next week for our showdown, or I'm sorry, for our Minisode next week, where we also reveal who our guest is going to be for that July Showdown, which is going to be a lot of dang old fun. So, yeah. All right. Anything else I'm forgetting, Steve?
Just tangentially, like we're talking about how this is kind of a stage play. I had a instance of falling asleep to Tubi. I fell asleep watching fucking Mystery Science Theater for the 8,000th time. But I was woken up to the craziest show I've ever seen. It's called The Goes Wrong Show.
Okay, so I started watching it because I saw you post about it.
Yeah.
And I had like just conference call after conference call today, but I had like a half-hour window at like 3 p.m. and I hadn't eaten lunch. So I sat down, ate some leftover chicken tendies that were in my fridge and started watching it. Holy shit, that show is funny.
It is so funny. It is the most Buster Keaton Looney Tunes ass shit I have seen in a long time.
Yeah.
It is so great. And I know we're not supposed to, be in love with Tubi anymore, but go check it out on Tubi.
Yeah, I think it's free on YouTube too if you want to check it out on there. But yeah, it looks like it's on quite a few streaming platforms. But I watched probably 2/3 of the first episode, and I was cracking the hell up. And I actually jumped on a call. I jumped on my last conference call of the day, and I even like suggested it to a couple of my coworkers that I know would love it. I'm like, you got to check this out. It's fucking, again, 20 minutes in, I was howling.
It's amazing. You'll like episodes 3 and 4 are so fucking crazy. You'll
Yeah, I was 20 minutes in. I was already in love with it. So I'm definitely going to check that out. What did I fall asleep last night watching on TV? It was a Tarantino. Inglourious Bastards. I don't know why I threw that on. I was watching that. I fucking love that movie. I fell asleep watching that last night. So yeah, Tubi is my sound machine, quite often. So, yeah. All right, boys and ghouls. That's all we got for this here Minisode. Tune in next week. Like I said, we get some fun announcements, and I don't even know what the hell we're going to talk about yet, but it's probably going to be spooky and it's going to be fun. So come check us out on that next Minisode. Send us some suggestions for the Showdown episode, and for the Halloween is Forever crew. I'm Brian.
And I'm Champ. Triple champ. Big old triple champ with the stouts in his hands.
Guys, give me some good Nickelodeon shit. I'm going to do Pete and Pete. I don't know if it's enough to win, but I got to get rid of this motherfucker. We got to finish this.
Triple champ.